Welcome to the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, where rude mechanicals do magic. Hello, I'm Bronze Age, Director of the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage. And today we have a repair on this bookshelf. I'm not really sure how we're going to do it. Maybe figuring it out as we go along. But I have a BF bench and I have a lot of clamps, so something's going to work out. This is a very simple but elegant bookcase. It's put together with no hardware, there's no nails, there's no screws. It's all just the joints and glue. This is oak, which has got a red mahogany stain on it. All the vertical pieces are set into dados in the shelf pieces, and that's all that holds it together, just that joint and the glue. The problem, you can see this is kind of a narrow piece right there in the middle. We come over here and we see on this end, somebody put a little too much weight on here and it just simply snapped off. It's not often I know the history of the pieces I work on, but in this case it's actually fairly well known. This bookcase was built in a high school in a class known as Industrial Arts, sometimes referred to as shop class. Shop class still survives today in some school systems, but only as a shadow of itself. It goes back to the early 1900s. There were classes for metalwork and automotive repair, but the most common was wood shop. It was a class where boys learned the use of basic hand tools. It was a course for boys in the same way home economics was a class for girls. Although many girls take industrial arts today, back then it was an all-male environment. If he did well at hand saws and planes, he could move on to big machines such as table saws and lathes. After mastering those skills, and he still had all his fingers, the young woodworker was expected to complete a project which exhibited his abilities. This greatly contributed to the nation's supply of birdhouses and gun racks. Some projects were more useful. Now I have an idea of how I'm going to repair this, and it helps that two of the glue joints have come loose, which makes it a little bit easier. It would be a lot easier if all the glue joints had come loose, and then I could have this board separated out, but I'm going to have to work with it glued together as it is. Plan A is to cut a slot, something like this, in this piece, and a corresponding slot in this piece, then cut a piece of wood that will be a splice in between the two of them. And of course that means that I have to figure out some way to cut a slot that deep in each of these pieces. Festool? Never heard of it. What we have here is the Lab CAB circular saw guide. And when I have this all clamped up, properly adjusted so that it lines up that edge there. Got to drop it down as far as it can go, and then push it from one side to the other. Come over a little bit, take another stroke, and then when I've got a slot 5/16 of an inch wide, maybe about 3/8, I think that'll do it. I'm going to stop. Okay, that's one cut, probably 10 more to go. I think my high school shop teacher, Mr. Brock, would have been happy with this project, except for one thing. You can see this rough, ragged edge here and a clean, smooth edge here. This wood we're looking at, it's actually part of this board. Because when it failed, the glue held and it ripped some of this board loose. But you can see that's still a nice, clean, smooth cut. So during the assembly, somehow the glue didn't get to the top edge. And that left it with a weak point, so that when there was enough force put on here, this little piece here, only that thick, was actually holding the end of the shelf up. And if it had been between two sides, it probably would have been enough. But you've got so much leverage right there, there's just no way that wasn't going to break eventually. Now for the splice, I need a board that is a little less than 10 inches wide to go through here. Now, I've got plenty of boards that would go in this way, but I need the grain to run this way. So it's going to have to be like this. And the last time I went to my favorite lumber yard to buy some white oak, the widest pieces they had were like 5.5, 6 inches wide. Because apparently 10-inch thick oak trees don't grow anymore. But what we'll be doing is taking this, cutting it into short pieces, gluing them together on edge, and make it big enough to fit in here with the grain going in the right direction. And up to this point, I haven't actually measured anything. For this kind of work, measurements just can't be precise enough. What matters is that it's got to fit. This is one of those points where everything has to be right. I don't want to end up trying to reduplicate this piece because I cut it the wrong way. So what I've done here is I've got my fence set up as square as I could possibly get it. I've got my distance here from my cut as close as I can possibly get it. And the plan is to run this piece through it, move the fence over about a 64th of an inch or so, run it through again until finally I come up with a nice tight fit with that splice without going over. So it's just going to be a very slow and tedious process, but it has to be if you want to get it right. This is the splice cut to the right length, and it looks rectangular, but it's actually not. This is kind of recessed along here, leaving the edges proud, because that's the joint that's going to see, and that way I don't have to rely on there being a perfectly flat bottom at the bottom of this groove. believe that's a good dry fit. All I have to do is figure out how I'm going to clamp it and glue it back together, and all that'll be left will be to trim off this piece as flush and try to stand them as close as possible to match. This is going to be an interesting glue up. Mainly because once I've got it together, I won't be able to see anything of what I'm doing. Now, I've got masking tape all over everything because I'm going to be using these square blocks to hold that shelf straight. And I don't want to glue my blocks to the shelf. Now this spot right here was the source of the original problem, because not enough glue got into that area the first time it was assembled, and that's what allowed this whole shelf here to break off. Now it sits overnight. I think this is going to come out pretty good. Well, it's another day. I almost got my feelings hurt the other day when some guy on YouTube had a video about taking a cheap block plane and making it into something nice, and then he pulls out this. I'm thinking, this is my Stanley G12. Not a cheap block plane. I mean, I didn't pay a lot of money for it, but it's a good block plane. Of course, I have to go back to my working on car days and remember that there was always somebody who wanted to convince me that his $13 snap-on wrench got the bolts tighter than my $4 Craftsman wrench. And pull the blade back just a little bit as we're coming in for a landing here. And that'll let me take it down to just about flush. I think that is going to do it. This is Bronze Age of the Secret Underground Laboratory, and my cheap block plane and I thank you for sticking through this video about repairing a industrial arts project from the 60s. I think it'll hang around for probably another 50 years or so. We still need to come up with a stain to match this. Some kind of red mahogany, probably with a red Sedona base. We'll get us close to this color. In any case, I do appreciate you watching. Hope that you look at the next video coming out in a week or so. We'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. Any comments, I always respond. Any questions about furniture repair in general, I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So again, thank you very much.